To make our dry fondant cream centers using dry fondant sugar, we are going to need a few things. So I've got a kitchen scale here, and I've gone ahead and weighed out my dry fondant sugar. You're going to want to consult the recipe for the exact measurements. I've got some butter, I have some cream, and I also have some vanilla bean paste that I will be adding. When I go to make my cordials, I will be adding a drop of invertase, and that just helps the cream filling to break down and liquefy. This is not absolutely necessary. I think I mentioned it in the equipment video, so you don't need to have this. But if you want that really juicy, liquidy center that you get from like a Godiva chocolate or a chocolatier, this is what they use. Once you open this, it needs to be refrigerated. So just keep that in mind. Don't tuck it back into your cabinet if you do decide to use this. It's totally 100% optional. This filling is going to be delicious on its own, and it will slightly break down as your cordials sit. This just speeds that process up quite a bit. So that's my conversation on that. Okay. I've got my vanilla. I'm going to get this stuff out of my way because I want to sift this dry fondant onto this piece of parchment I have sitting here. And the reason being is that it does tend to clump. There is no cornstarch in this. This is just straight up sugar and inverted sugar. So sugar and inverted sugar. The inverted sugar is what chocolatiers use. The challenge with regular powdered sugar, and I'm just going to sift this as I'm talking to get these lumps out right onto the parchment. The problem with powdered sugar is that the amount of cornstarch that is in it is not regulated. So you don't know how much cornstarch you're getting in your end product. This doesn't have any cornstarch in it. So that's what the dealio is on that. Plus it's got that inverted sugar. So don't worry about it. If you don't have that, you can check out the no-cook fondant recipe that does use powdered sugar as well as corn syrup, which is a great alternative. This can be expensive, and it sometimes can be hard to find. It does have about a year shelf life. If you do buy it, you can use it for other things like making other types of cream centers, like the flavored ones that you get in the box chocolates, the creamy flavored centers. I use it also to make peppermint patties. So if you want to make homemade, but you can see it's pretty clumped because there is no cornstarch in here. It is sugar. I'm just going to come through and bust those up because I will be kneading this dough. So having those big lumps are not helpful to having a smooth finished product. I'm just kind of grinding them up against the strainer here. All right. Any hard lumps, you just want to discard those. If it won't go through the sifter, you don't want it. Then I'm just going to take my parchment here, and I am going to very carefully pour this back in the container now that I have sifted it. Perfect. So now it is nice and sifted, and I will reuse this piece of parchment when it is time to knead. Next, what I'm going to do is I am going to take my butter and my cream. This is a small amount because we're making a small batch. You could absolutely boost this recipe up. I'm just going to take these two items and I am going to mix them together here. I'm just going to put my butter here, and then I'm going to put my cream, and then I'm just going to microwave this until it is boiling. Not boiling over, but boiling. Like I said, you could do this on the stovetop, but for such a small amount, you may as well just do it in the microwave. Okay, so into the microwave we go. Okay, so I just took this out of the microwave. It was bubbling. Just calm down a little bit. So that butter and that cream are mixed. And then I'm just going to grab another bowl. I'm going to go ahead and put my dry fondant mix in. And then I'm just going to add in this liquid. And then I'm going to add in 1/8 teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. So this is a 1/4 teaspoon measure, so I'm going to just do half of that. And this is just going to give it a really nice flavor. Because who doesn't love vanilla bean paste? It's the caviar of the vanilla bean. Delicious. And then I'm just going to mix this all together. Get that nice and incorporated. Okay, this is very liquidy. It's exactly what you want, because as it starts to cool down, it will thicken up. At this point, if you were wanting to make some different flavors, you could add in different candy flavorings. For cherry cordials, which is what I'm using this for, I could also take out the cream and add instead the maraschino cherry juice. I like the cream. I just think that with the butter, it just adds a really nice richness to this. You could also dye it at this point if you wanted it to be a different color. Lots of things that you can do. I'm going to go ahead and pour this out right here onto this piece of parchment. And then I'm just going to let it cool down so that I can then knead it. We're just going to let this chill out, cool down a little bit. And I'm going to just take my piece of parchment and fold it over. And then I'm just going to let this cool down before I come back to knead it. And that is it for right this second. All right, so our dry fondant mixture has cooled. I have sifted another ounce of the dry fondant here using my mesh sieve. Now, if you are going to be using this in a chocolate mold and you are not going to be using the invertase, then at this point, you'll see that it is very loose. So I can actually scrape this up. So it's very loose. So if you're not using the invertase, at this point, I want you to just take it, scoop it up, and put it into a container so that you can cap the bottom part with this. And this will, having it be this creamy, will help break it down when it sits molded with the cherry. Not having that invertase, isn't a big deal. So I just wanted to kind of show you that texture. If you are not using the invertase, but you are using the dry fondant, then I just want you to scoop this up and put it into a container. If you are using the dry fondant, but do have the invertase, then you are going to want to make this a little bit more into a dough. Likewise, if you are going to not be molding, so if you're using the dry fondant but you're not using a candy mold, you're just going to be using the cherry and dipping it, then you want to firm this up. So I have some of the dry fondant here. I sifted 1 ounce. I'm just going to mix this together until it's not so loose and becomes more of a dough. This is going to be really important if you are using the dry fondant and you are going to be just using stemmed cherries, or you are going to be using stemless cherries, but you're going to be dipping them instead of using a mold. I'm just going to keep sprinkling this until it firms up to more of a dough consistency that I could actually roll so it's not so sticky. So still very sticky. Very important that you sift that so that you don't get those big chunks in here. If you were making like peppermint patties, you would want this to be a lot firmer anyway. Because typically when you make peppermint patties, you will be putting those into a round mold and encasing it between chocolate as well. I'm just going to keep working this in right here on my parchment. Just adding a little bit of that dry fondant at a time. Just keep going. So it's starting to definitely firm up. So this is definitely better. Now you can see it's turning more into a dough. It's a little bit tacky still. But I can at least handle it now. At this point, I'm just kind of kneading this. And that is starting to feel better. We want this to be thick enough so that we can roll it out. I want to make sure that I get all of those loose pieces of the powder, which you probably can't see on camera, incorporated. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and put the rest. You see how I can roll it into a log now? So that is exactly what I'm going for. Any loose little bits of powder, I'm just rolling it around to grab, and this looks good. So this is exactly what you want. It's definitely pliable. It's not super hard or anything, but it is definitely pliable, which is what we want, because once we go to roll this out, if, like I said, if you were doing just the molded, you can leave it looser. You don't need to knead all of this in. So there you go. Nice and firm. It's not super firm though, but it's moldable. If you are doing just stemless cherries that you're going to want to dip, you need this to be pliable so that you can actually wrap it around the cherry. So that's what we were going for. Likewise, if you are using stemless cherries and you're just dipping, you want this to be pliable. So that's what you're looking for. And then if you were using the invertase, because if you really wanted these to liquefy, then right before you go to make your cordials is when you would knead in a drop or two of that invertase, and all that does is speed up that breaking down process to liquefy this. But we made this really tasty with the butter and the heavy cream. So this is going to taste so delicious as a filling around our cherries for our cherry cordials, regardless of what method you decide to go with. So now I'm just going to wrap this up in a clean piece of parchment, and it's ready to go when I'm ready to make my cordials. That's it.